stratified epithelial tissues. So we finished looking at the simple tissues. Now we will be looking at the stratified tissues. First, let me remind you what I mean when I say stratified tissues. So epithelial tissues have the three-name naming convention that we generally use: stratified, squamous epithelium, simple cuboidal epithelium. And the first word, simple or stratified, usual first word, refers to how many layers of cells I'm going to run into if I go from the apical surface to the basement membrane. If it's one, then it's a simple tissue. If it's more than one, it's a stratified tissue. Okay, so now we are going to be doing the stratified tissues. Let's start with stratified squamous epithelium. There are two different categories of stratified squamous epithelia. Here's the first. Remember, these figures from your textbook generally have the actual histology image and then a drawing so that you can see what you're looking at. So this tissue, hopefully you can tell that it's an epithelium because, of course, it's got a free apical surface, and then the basal surface has tissue underneath it. Can you tell that it's stratified? Stratified says more than one layer of cells as I go from the apical to the basal surface. So this is a stratified tissue. And what about squamous? Well, this tissue is actually named for the shape of the cells at the apical surface, because once you get down to the basal surface, they're really not squamous. So this is called stratified squamous because the cells at the apical surface are squamous. So this is a stratified squamous epithelium. But there are two stratified squamous epithelia. This one is found lining the oral cavity and also lining the vagina and the distal end of the digestive tract, the rectum. And it has a fast rate of cell division and regeneration, and there's lots of cells that you can pull off the surface without actually doing significant damage to the tissue. But it has a source of moisture. So the oral cavity, if I impaled myself with a Dorito, I might not even notice that it happened 30, 45 minutes later. There's a lot of tissue there, and also it has a rapid rate of cell division and regeneration. But this is called moist or non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Keep it in mind as I compare it to the other stratified squamous epithelium. This tissue has basically what it is kind of like a moist stratified squamous epithelium plus a whole bunch of dead cells on the surface that are primarily packed with this protein called keratin, and keratin is a waterproofing protein. So you find this in areas in which you need protection for abrasion, but you also have the likelihood of water loss. So this would, for instance, be found on the epidermis of your skin. So it's stratified squamous. I've got these stratified cells with living nuclei all the way up to there, and then that's the basal surface right down here. But then I've got more on the surface. I've got dead cells on the surface. So this is called keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, and you find it on the epidermis of your skin. So let me show you a few different images of the two stratified squamous epithelia and see if you can figure out which one's which. Now remember, when you're looking at the moist one, you want to see nuclei all the way to the surface. If you're looking at the keratinized one, you're going to see nuclei, and then it's going to stop, and you're going to have dead cells on the surface. So let's look at the next one. What do you guys think this one is? Is this moist or keratinized stratified squamous epithelium? So I have nuclei all the way up to here, but then I've got other stuff, right? So what do you think that one is? That one's a keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. What about this one? Not a great picture, but can you see nuclei all the way up to here? Usually the nuclei just look like dark dots. And you can, right? So this is a moist stratified squamous epithelium. What about this one? This is less magnification. Do you see nuclei all the way up to the top? It's obviously stratified. There's squamous at the top, right? And it doesn't have dead cells on the surface. So this is a moist stratified squamous epithelium. This is a close-up of just the apical surface of a moist stratified squamous epithelium so that you can see. I'm not saying there's nuclei in every single cell, but nuclei go all the way up to that level. So this is a moist stratified squamous. This is a moist stratified squamous. This is moist as well, nuclei all the way up to the top. And then this one, so, oops, sorry. This one right here, So I've got nuclei all the way up to here, and then a bunch of dead stuff. So this is a keratinized, stratified squamous epithelium. So how do you get good at these? You actually look at a lot of them. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you now, and I will reinforce later, that it's unlikely that I will ask you or your lab instructor will ask you the figure from your textbook, because if you only look at that figure, you're memorizing. If you look at 20 figures and you start to figure out what they have in common, then you're actually learning. So in the last epithelial video, I'll throw a whole bunch of unfamiliar epithelial tissues with you, at you, and let you get used to identifying unfamiliar epithelial tissues, because it's not as hard as you think it is after you've got a little practice going. Okay, but there are some more stratified tissues. There are stratified cuboidal epithelium, stratified columnar, and then transitional, and then we'll talk about the pseudostratified tissue. So next, what we are going to do is to move on to this one. This guy right here is called stratified cuboidal epithelium. So let's figure out how we could tell that it's an epithelium, because it's got an apical surface, not touching anything, a free surface. Then the basal surface has another tissue underneath it, so it's epithelial tissue. It's stratified because I can see two distinct layers of nuclei on top of one another. And then it's cuboidal because the cells are about as wide as they are tall. Now I realize in this image you can't necessarily see the boundaries of each cell, but you can tell sort of that they're about as wide as they are tall. This is stratified cuboidal epithelium. You find this in the sweat glands, the mammary glands, salivary glands, and then this one is a stratified columnar epithelium. It's not a very common tissue. Do you see that it's an epithelium? Because it's got the free surface and then the basal surface, and that it's stratified because I've got one layer of nuclei on this surface and then another layer down here. Okay. And then why is it columnar? Well, because as far as you can tell, the cells are taller than they are wide, right? So they're taller. So this is a stratified columnar epithelium, not a very common tissue in the body. It's found in the distal end of the male urethra. The female urethra is much shorter. It's not found in that one. Okay, and then the last of the stratified tissues doesn't use the naming convention that we're used to. This is called transitional epithelium, and it's localized to the urinary tract. What it has it is definitely stratified. There are cells that they're piling on top of one another. It's definitely an epithelium. But as far as the middle word, what the shape of the cell is, this tissue is found lining the urinary bladder, and it looks like this with these dome-shaped cells when it's empty or not stretched. But when it's stretched, it actually kind of looks like moist stratified squamous epithelium. So I don't usually ask it of you in the stretched format because it's really hard to tell from the other one. So this one is called transitional epithelium. It doesn't have the traditional naming mechanism, but it is actually a stratified tissue. And then the last of the epithelial tissues is this guy right here, which is pseudostratified epithelium. But the way that the name is the way that it's named, a lot of times different textbooks use these four terms in a bunch of different orders. So I learned this one as pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. So let's look at why it's pseudostratified, what we've got going on here. So pseudostratified means it looks stratified, but it's not. Okay. So, and then the cells are mostly taller than they are wide, so it's columnar. And then we'll talk about cilia in the next video, so how you can tell this is cilia. All right, so let's talk about why it's pseudostratified. What do we mean by pseudostratified? What we mean by pseudostratified is that the cells, they look like they're piling on top of one another, but if you look at them, what they really are is some of them are little bitty short cells like this guy, but it's stuck to the basement membrane. Some of them are tall cells that go all the way to the surface, and you got medium ones, you got more tall ones. But the important thing is that they're all stuck to the basement membrane. So they're false stratified. It's pseudostratified. It's not actually stratified. Okay, so the pseudostratified epithelium looks layered, but it's not. Okay, and this one can confuse people, but there are only two ciliated tissues that you're learning. So really what you're going to have to do is to tell it from the other ciliated tissue, which was ciliated simple columnar epithelium. And I'll show you guys how to do that. So this pseudostratified tissue in the cilia on the surface, you find it lining the upper respiratory tract, and the cilia actually wave up to keep you from snorting in all of those respiratory irritants that might be in the air. So it also has these things that I haven't pointed out to you yet, but we will. These little guys called goblet cells. That's a goblet cell right there. Those actually produce a protein called mucin that when it mixes with water makes mucus. And so the mucus and the cilia actually help to keep your respiratory tract clean. So you find that one lining the upper respiratory tract. Last thing I'm going to say in this set of notes, this video is you need to get some practice, and you are going to have to know where things occur in the human body. And I'm going to teach you some ways to remember that. But before I end this video, I want to give you guys a little bit of practice of looking at the pseudostratified and stratified tissues. So what do you think this one is? So can we tell it's an epithelium? Yeah, because it's got that apical surface. It looks stratified, right? It looks like it's got more than one layer of nuclei from the apical surface to the basal surface. And notice these dome-shaped cells on the surface. So this one is transitional epithelium. How about this one? Okay, is it an epithelium? Yep. Apical surface is free, basal surface. Does it look stratified? Yeah, it does, right? One layer of nuclei, another layer of nuclei. Stratified what? This one looks like stratified taller than it is wide. This one looks like stratified columnar epithelium. How about this one? Okay, dome-shaped cells at the surface, right? So this one's probably not called stratified, but it is one. This one is transitional epithelium. How about this one? Specifically, we're looking at the tissue that's forming this tube right here, or this tube right here. So this is a cross section instead of a longitudinal section, but I've got two different layers of cells from the apical surface to the outside, or the basal surface. But they're about as wide as they are tall. So this is stratified cuboidal epithelium. Okay, this one, kind of a mess, look all over one another, got goblet cells, got cilia on it, stacked on top of one another. This one is pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. This one is also pseudostratified. Again, cilia on the surface, kind of looks like a mess, goblet cells, right? This is pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. So that's a little practice for you guys, and you can go over it and look at it again. And in the last epithelial video, I will show you the surface features and how to tell cilia and microvilli from one another.